There's a difference between loving someone and feeding their ego. One nourishes connection, the other fuels manipulation. Sometimes a man doesn't want you, he wants your attention. He wants the validation that comes from knowing you still care, that he still has access to you. And the more you react, the more you chase, the more you explain, the fuller his ego becomes. But here's the truth: when you stop feeding that ego, you shift the entire balance. You take back your power, because your energy, your attention, your softness, your effort isn't just loved, it's fuel. And when you stop giving it to the wrong person, that person starts to starve. He doesn't miss you at first. He misses the way you made him feel about himself. And that's where the lesson begins, because the moment you stop feeding his ego is the moment he starts realizing how empty his world feels without your energy in it. He loved the attention. Maybe he didn't say it outright, but you could feel it. Every time you complimented him, every time you reached out first, every time you tried to reassure him that you cared, it wasn't your love he was responding to, it was the satisfaction of being wanted. You thought you were building connection, but what you were really doing was feeding his ego. You kept giving pieces of yourself to someone who mistook your effort for proof of his importance. It wasn't that he loved you more when you gave him attention. It's that he loved himself more when you did. That's what happens when someone isn't emotionally mature enough to appreciate genuine affection. They start to see your kindness as a reflection of their superiority. Every message you send first, every attempt to fix things, every time you lower your standards just to keep the peace, it all tells him one thing: that he can keep giving less and still keep you. And the more you give, the less he values it, because the easier something comes, the less meaning it holds for someone whose ego thrives on the chase, not the connection. You started to notice it too, how his responses became shorter, how his effort faded once he knew you cared, how suddenly your love felt one-sided. He wasn't giving, he was taking, and not just your time or affection, but your emotional energy. Because for a man like that, attention is power. Every time you tried to fix what was breaking, he got the message that you'd always try harder, even if he didn't. That's not love, it's control disguised as confidence. But the truth is that confidence was never real. It was built on your validation. He needed you to keep showing up so he could keep feeling significant. Because deep down, his ego isn't as strong as it looks. It's fragile, constantly needing proof that he still matters, that he can still have you when he wants. And as long as you were there, offering reassurance, he didn't have to face that insecurity. You were his emotional safety net, and he mistook that comfort for control. Then something shifted in you. You got tired. You realized that love shouldn't feel like constant performance, like you have to keep proving your worth to stay wanted. You started to pull back, maybe quietly at first. You stopped responding so fast, stopped initiating, stopped explaining what he should already know. And suddenly, the dynamic changed. The confidence he had started to fade. The ego that seemed untouchable began to starve. Because without your energy feeding it, there was nothing left to sustain it. You see, when you stop feeding someone's ego, you don't have to punish them. You just stop playing the role that made them feel powerful. And when you do that, they're forced to confront the truth. Their worth wasn't coming from within. It was coming from your validation. That realization is what breaks them, not your anger, not your words, but your absence. He'll start wondering what happened, why your energy feels different, why your attention isn't so easy anymore. And the irony is, that's when he starts noticing you again, because your withdrawal exposes what he really valued all along. It wasn't your love, it was your attention, the part of you that made him feel special, important, admired. But now that it's gone, he feels small, because the illusion he built about himself depended entirely on your belief in him. And here's the most powerful part. You don't even have to do anything dramatic. You don't have to announce your worth or prove your point. You just stop giving what was never reciprocated. The ego that once seemed larger than life will start to shrink in silence. And as he begins to starve for the energy he once took for granted, you'll realize that the power was never his, it was always yours. Attention is one of the most valuable forms of energy you possess, but most people don't realize how much power they give away through it. Every text you send, every time you check his social media, every time you replay what he said in your mind, you're spending emotional currency. The problem is, when you give that currency to someone who hasn't earned it, it becomes worthless. It's like pouring water into a leaking cup. No matter how much you give, it never fills, and you're the one left feeling drained. When a man knows that your attention is guaranteed, he stops valuing it. It's human nature. What's abundant loses meaning. But when your attention becomes something rare, something intentional, something he has to rise to deserve, that's when it starts to hold weight again. Most women don't realize that their energy is the prize. The way you listen, the way you show up, the way you love. It's a kind of nourishment. And not everyone deserves to be fed by that. Attention is not about chasing or performing, it's about presence. Where your attention goes, your energy follows. When you're constantly thinking about someone who gives you inconsistency, you're giving them emotional access they haven't earned. And that's where most people get it wrong. They think love is about giving endlessly, but true love has boundaries. It's knowing who gets your focus and who doesn't. When you start pulling your attention back from someone who's only been taking it, something powerful happens. You start to remember what it feels like to invest in yourself. That same energy you used to spend analyzing his words can go into your goals, your peace, your happiness. You begin to glow differently because your energy is no longer scattered, it's centered. You stop trying to make him see your worth and start living it. And that shift doesn't just change how you feel, it changes how people perceive you. He'll start to notice too. Because when you were chasing him with your attention, he felt secure. He knew he could pull back and you'd still be there, waiting to reassure him, to make the effort, to close the distance. But when your focus changes, when your time, energy, and thoughts stop revolving around him, he feels it. The silence becomes uncomfortable for him, not for you. Because for the first time, his ego isn't being fed by your consistency. It's starving. The man who once took your attention for granted suddenly begins to crave it, not because he misses you in a deep, emotional way, but because he's addicted to the way your energy made him feel about himself. He starts to realize that your focus was a mirror. When you looked at him with admiration, he felt significant. Now, without that reflection, he's left with the truth. His importance was never real. It was borrowed from your belief in him. That's why attention is so powerful. It builds or breaks dynamics. When you spend it on someone who truly values you, it strengthens the connection. But when you spend it on someone who uses it to feed their ego, it becomes your weakness. And the moment you recognize that, you stop giving it away so easily. You become more intentional with your time, more selective with your emotional energy, more focused on yourself. You stop chasing people who drain you and start attracting people who match you, because when your energy is grounded in self-respect, your attention becomes sacred. You don't offer it to anyone who doesn't bring peace, clarity, and genuine effort, and that's when you become magnetic. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because your attention now carries a weight that only people with real value can hold. When you spend your attention wisely, you stop feeding egos and start feeding your soul. You realize that the energy you give determines the quality of the love you receive. And once you know that, you'll never waste your attention on someone who only wants to feel important. You'll save it for someone who wants to feel connected. Silence is one of the most powerful responses you can ever give to someone who thrives on control. When someone's ego depends on your reaction, Your emotions become their fuel. They provoke, withdraw, or create confusion not always because they want to hurt you, but because your emotional response feeds them. It reminds them they still have power over you. That's why they'll say things that don't make sense, disappear when you need them most, or act indifferent when they know you care. They're not seeking understanding, they're seeking a reaction, because as long as you're reacting, they're relevant. When you stop explaining yourself, when you stop defending what they already know they did wrong, you take that power back. Silence isn't weakness, it's emotional discipline. It's saying, you no longer have the right to access my energy. It's the refusal to keep entertaining confusion when you already have clarity. And that's what most people don't realize. Your silence says more than any confrontation ever could. It communicates boundaries, strength, and peace in a language the ego can't manipulate. When you stop engaging, you disrupt their pattern. They don't know what to do with silence because their confidence was built on your response. The ego needs validation, even if it's negative. Anger, sadness, pleading, it all tells them they still matter. So when you go quiet, when you don't chase clarity, when you don't rise to the bait, their entire sense of control begins to crumble. Suddenly, the person who seemed detached is the one losing balance. Because silence is not absent, it's a mirror. It reflects their own emptiness back at them. At first, your silence will confuse them, they'll test it. They might try to provoke you again, just to see if you'll break. They'll wait for the message that says you still care, for the emotion that reassures them they still matter. But when you remain calm, when you hold your peace, they begin to feel something unfamiliar loss. Not necessarily of you, but of the control your emotions once gave them. It's not about punishing them, it's about protecting your peace. There's something magnetic about a person who doesn't need to explain themselves anymore. It's the energy of someone who has seen the game, understood it, and chosen not to play. You don't need to announce that you're done. Silence does that for you. You don't need to convince anyone of your worth. Your absence speaks louder than words ever could. Because when someone's ego feeds on attention, nothing starves it faster than indifference. Your silence doesn't just protect your peace, it redefines your value. It shifts the power dynamic back to where it belongs. Suddenly, they're the one wondering what you're thinking, what you're feeling, whether you still care. The same person who once took your attention for granted now finds themselves desperate for it. That's the irony. What they once dismissed becomes the very thing they crave when it's gone. And you don't have to do anything to make that happen. Your silence does the work. You start to feel lighter, too. Because silence doesn't just affect them, it heals you. It gives you space to process without pressure, to breathe without overthinking, to detach without guilt. You begin to see how much of your energy used to go into explaining, defending, and trying to fix things that were never yours to fix. And once you've experienced that peace, you won't trade it for noise ever again. When you master silence, you master self-respect. You no longer chase understanding from people who enjoy confusion. You no longer offer your emotional clarity to people who misuse it. And in that calm, quiet strength, something beautiful happens. Their ego begins to starve, but your soul begins to heal. Silence stops being uncomfortable and starts feeling like freedom, because it's not that you stopped caring, it's that you started caring about yourself more. Confidence can be a convincing disguise. Some people wear it like armor, but underneath it's hollow. When you were in his life, he looked sure of himself, steady, charismatic, in control. But what you didn't see at first was that so much of that confidence came from your energy. It was your admiration that made him feel powerful, your affection that made him feel wanted, your belief that made him feel capable. He wasn't as strong as he seemed. He was borrowing your validation to keep his ego inflated. Every compliment, every reassurance, every effort you gave was a deposit into his sense of worth. Without it, his self-image starts to crack. He didn't build his confidence from within, he built it from reflection, from how you saw him. You became his mirror. Every time you looked at him with love, he saw himself as valuable. Every time you forgave him, he felt untouchable. Every time you tried harder, he believed he was worth chasing. But what happens when the mirror disappears? What happens when the source of that validation steps back, tired of feeding someone who never reciprocates? Suddenly, the reflection fades, and he's forced to face himself without your energy to define him. That's when the illusion begins to collapse. When you were giving him attention, he looked like he had it all figured out. He acted confident because he knew you'd always be there to remind him that he was special, that he mattered, that he could get away with giving less. But once you stopped overgiving, his confidence lost its audience. He's not as composed as he once was. The same man who seemed unbothered now starts to wonder what changed, why you're quieter, why your tone is different, why you no longer react, because what he mistook for unconditional admiration was actually your patience, and that patience has an end. You see, when someone's confidence depends on how others see them, it's fragile, it's performative. The moment the validation stops, so does the performance, and that's when you start to see who they really are, someone who doesn't know how to feel significant without being admired. It's not real strength, it's borrowed strength. And you were the one lending it to him every time you excused behavior that hurt you, every time you built him up even when he wasn't showing up for you. That's why when you pull back, he feels smaller, because without your emotional investment, he has to rely on his own sense of worth, and deep down, he knows that's something he's never truly built. He'll try to find that validation elsewhere. He might post more, flirt more, or act indifferent, trying to convince himself he doesn't need you. But none of it fills the void you left, because it wasn't about you as a person. It was about what your presence did for his ego. He'll chase the same feeling in other places, but it won't last, because true confidence can't be borrowed, it has to be built. And without your energy sustaining him, the cracks start to show. Meanwhile, you start to notice your own power returning. You realize you were the steady one all along. You were the one giving, supporting, believing, and holding the emotional weight of that connection. And now, without constantly pouring into him, that energy starts to flow back to you. You stop feeling drained and start feeling peaceful. You see that the confidence he projected wasn't real strength. It was dependency. He needed your attention the way a flame needs oxygen. And when you stopped feeding it, the fire burned out. In time, he'll remember how different he felt around you, how confident he seemed when your light was on him. But what he won't easily admit is that it was never his glow, it was yours. And now that you've taken it back, he's left to rebuild from a foundation that was never his to begin with. That's the cost of borrowed confidence. It disappears the moment the lender walks away. Detachment isn't cold. It's clarity. It's the moment you finally see things as they are, not as you wish they were. For a long time, you kept giving, hoping that consistency would inspire reciprocity, that if you just loved harder, he would meet you halfway. But emotional maturity doesn't grow in response to your effort. It grows from someone's own willingness to evolve. You can't teach someone to care with your sacrifices, and at some point, you realize that love, without mutual respect and effort, becomes exhaustion disguised as devotion. That's where detachment begins, not from bitterness but from understanding. When you start detaching, it's not because you've stopped loving, it's because you've stopped losing yourself in that love. You no longer confuse chaos for passion or inconsistency for depth. You stop chasing explanations that won't change anything. You stop trying to convince someone to value you because you finally see that your worth was never something to be proven. That realization brings a calm that used to feel impossible. It's not a wall you build, it's a boundary you honor. Detachment isn't a lack of emotion, it's the protection of your energy from someone who never knew what to do with it. For so long, you may have mistaken caring for fixing. You thought that if you just showed him enough patience, he would change. That if you were understanding enough, he would become more consistent, but all that did was teach him that you would keep showing up, no matter what he gave. Your heart became a place where he could unload his confusion without ever resolving it. Detachment ends that cycle. It's the quiet realization that love shouldn't require you to shrink, explain, or beg. It's the understanding that you can care deeply and still choose distance when that care isn't respected. When you start pulling your energy back, he feels it, not immediately, maybe, but eventually, because what fed his sense of control wasn't your presence, it was your effort. The texts, the overthinking, the checking in, the second chances, all of it made him feel significant. When that stops, he feels the emptiness he's created. Detachment doesn't punish him. It simply returns his behavior to him. The silence he gave you is now his. The confusion he caused is now his to sit with. The distance he built is now a wall he has to face from the other side. What detachment really gives you is perspective. You stop reacting and start observing. You begin to see his patterns clearly, without emotion clouding your judgment. You notice how his words don't match his actions, how his charm only shows up when he senses you slipping away. But this time you don't fall for it. You recognize the difference between connection and control. You understand that not every person who reaches for you deserves another chance to hold you. And in that moment, you take your power back. Not by fighting, not by explaining, but by simply walking away with your peace intact. There's a deep beauty in that kind of strength, because detachment isn't numbness, it's self-respect in motion. It's you saying, I still care, but not at the expense of my peace. You're no longer waiting for him to understand what he lost. You're too busy rediscovering what you gained, your freedom, your energy, your sense of self, and the truth is, that's when he starts to feel the weight of his choices. Because the energy that once made him feel whole is no longer his to access. In time, he'll realize that your detachment wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. You didn't stop loving him, you stopped overextending yourself. You didn't become distant, you became self-aware. And while he's left trying to figure out how to fill the void your presence once covered, you'll be at peace knowing you didn't lose him, you simply found yourself again. At first, he doesn't notice your silence. He assumes it's temporary, that you're just pulling back for a moment before you return to the pattern he's grown so comfortable with. He's confident that you'll check in again, that you'll break the silence, that you'll find a reason to reconnect even after the distance. Because that's how it's always been. You've always been the one who softened, who explained, who reached out. But this time is different. This time you've stopped feeding his ego, and he doesn't realize yet what that really means. At first, he feels nothing but surprise, then confusion, then slowly discomfort, because your absence doesn't just remove attention, it removes identity. For someone whose ego was built on being desired, your detachment becomes a mirror. He begins to see how much of his confidence depended on your admiration, how much of his self-worth was borrowed from your energy. He's not missing your messages, your calls, or your affection as much as he's missing the feeling of being needed. He's missing the reflection of himself that you once provided, the version of him that looked better in your light. That's the irony of emotional detachment. It teaches them their own emptiness. When you were around, your energy made everything feel easy. He didn't have to work for validation because you handed it to him freely. He didn't have to prove his consistency because you were patient enough to believe in his potential. You gave him emotional nourishment even when he wasn't earning it. And now that it's gone, he's starving for something he doesn't know how to replace. Because it wasn't about love, it was about what your love did for his ego. In the beginning, he'll try to fill that void with distractions. He might go out more, talk to other people, post things that look like confidence, but behind all of it, there's a quiet restlessness. Because none of it feels the same. None of it feeds him the way your energy did. Your kindness, your understanding, your ability to make him feel seen. That was a kind of nourishment that surface-level attention can't imitate. The world can give him interest, but it can't give him meaning, and now he feels the difference. You won't see it right away, but it will happen. He'll revisit old memories, the moments when you laughed easily, when you believed in him, when your eyes held warmth even when he didn't deserve it. Those memories used to be background noise. Now they echo, because memory has a cruel way of haunting those who took love for granted. He doesn't just remember you, he remembers how he felt when he was with you. The peace, the validation, the sense of being someone. And that's what he's really craving, not you as a person, but the emotional home your presence created. The more time passes, the clearer it becomes. He starts to realize that your energy wasn't replaceable. It was rare. That your attention wasn't a given, it was a gift. And by the time he understands that, it's too late. Because the same silence that once felt like power to him now feels like loss. He thought you were withholding something to make a point, but you weren't. You simply stopped giving what was never valued, and that quiet truth hits harder than any confrontation could. He'll look for traces of you, maybe even reach out, hoping for a glimpse of the warmth he used to take for granted. But it won't be the same, because you've changed, you've healed in your silence, you've learned to give your energy to peace, not ego. And that transformation is irreversible. He's now left with the ghost of what he once had, the echo of your energy, the memory of your light, the realization that he lost something he never fully appreciated. And that's what starving really feels like. Not physical hunger, but emotional deprivation, because he lost the right to your energy, but not the memory of it. And memories can't feed him the way your presence once did. They only remind him of what he'll never taste again. There comes a moment when you realize that power doesn't come from being wanted, it comes from knowing when to stop giving your energy to what drains you. You don't win by proving your worth to someone whose ego feeds on your effort. You win by walking away with your peace intact. Because when you stop feeding his ego, something remarkable happens. You stop living on his emotional terms. You start reclaiming your own. He'll feel it. He'll notice the shift, even if he doesn't admit it. The silence that once made him confident will begin to echo with the sound of his own emptiness. He'll remember your softness, your care, your attention, and he'll realize those things weren't guaranteed. They were gifts he mistook for obligation, and when those gifts are gone, he'll understand that your energy was never his to own. It was his privilege to experience. But by then, you won't be waiting for that realization. You'll be somewhere quieter, calmer, more whole. You'll have learned that detachment doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. It teaches you that love is not measured by how much you give, but by how peacefully you can walk away when giving is no longer respected. That's real strength. That's what self-worth looks like in motion, because in the end his ego might starve, but your spirit will thrive. You'll no longer feed what only takes. You'll feed your purpose, your growth, your joy. You'll attract people who don't crave your energy for validation, but match it with their own. And that's when you'll know you've truly evolved. You've stopped being the source of someone else's false confidence and become the source of your own peace. He may still think about you, he may still feel the hunger for your attention, but that's no longer your responsibility. His ego will miss your energy, but your soul will be free.